Okay, so you sent us down a real rabbit hole with this one.
Uh-huh.
We're talking double murder,
Yeah.
a convicted killer with a huge EE online following,
Right.
and like whispers of a human trafficking ring.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, where do we even begin?
Well, what's so fascinating about this Wade Wilson case is how it, messes with your perception of truth. You've got these brutal confessions, but then this whole other narrative spins out,
Yeah.
almost like two separate realities colliding.
Right. It's like he's living in a true crime novel he wrote himself.
Yeah.
But before we dive into all that, let's rewind to the crimes themselves.
Okay.
October 2019, two women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, end up dead.
And their deaths were brutal.
Yeah.
Christine was found strangled in her own apartment.
Oh,
Well, Diane, imagine the most horrific hit and run you can.
Yeah.
And multiply that by several degrees.
It's the kind of stuff that makes you want to sleep with the lights on.
Right.
What we know is that Wade encountered both women in the days leading up to their deaths.
And this is where those confessions come in. You might be thinking, okay, confessions open and shut, right?
Right.
Now hold on, because this is where it gets wild.
Okay.
He confesses to his father, then to a friend.
What?
Even brags to detectives while eating a burger.
Who does that?
It's almost like he wants to get caught.
Or like he's playing a role or something.
Yeah,
But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
true.
Okay.
Let's stick with those early confessions for a second. What's striking is how casual he is.
Okay.
He calls his dad and says, "I choked that expletive," referring to Christine.
Oh my God.
He tells his friend he ran over Diane until she looked like spaghetti,
Jeez.
chill and stuff.
And the details he gives, it's not just a vague admission of guilt.
No.
He describes how he strangled Christine in her sleep, how he picked up Diane on the street.
Yeah.
It's like he's recounting a grocery list, not confessing to double murder.
Exactly. And those details combined with physical evidence at the crime scenes, Wade's fingerprints on Christine's car, Diane's phone found inside the vehicle he was driving, painted a pretty damning picture.
So they've got the confessions, they've got the evidence.
Right.
Sounds like a slam dunk for the prosecution, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But this is Wade Wilson we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's got a few more cards up his sleeve.
Okay.
Because while he's in jail awaiting trial, he drops a bombshell.
Okay.
He claims he was framed. He says he's been caught up in the sinister human trafficking ring. Drugs, guns, the works.
Wow.
Operating out of some resort down in the Keys.
Hold up. So he
Yeah.
goes from confessing to these incredibly violent murders to claiming he's being framed by like a shadowy criminal organization.
It's a heck of a plot twist.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, he does not skim on the details.
Okay.
He names the ringleader as Eric.
Uh-huh.
Describes this whole operation with chilling precision.
Right.
Even claims they burned down his adoptive parents' house as a warning.
Okay, now this is where my inner skeptic starts waving red flags.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right. And that's the thing. Human trafficking is a real and terrifying problem.
Right.
But it also makes for a convenient scapegoat,
Yeah.
especially when you're facing serious prison time.
So the question is he a master manipulator weaving this like super convincing lie?
Right.
Or is there any chance, any sliver of possibility that he's telling the truth?
To answer that, you have to look at the timing of everything.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about his multiple confessions?
Yeah.
Well, he tells his father he committed the murders before this alleged arson even happens.
Whoa, you're right.
Yeah.
So why confess if your family wasn't even threatened yet? That's a huge inconsistency in his story.
Exactly. And it's not the only one,
Okay.
but here's where it gets even more complicated.
Right.
Remember you sent over some social media posts about this case?
Yeah, tons of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like this whole other dimension of the story unfolded online.
It's almost unbelievable Wade Wilson from behind bars has amassed this army of supporters.
Wes.
They believe he's innocent,
Really?
that he's a victim of this trafficking ring. They're raising money for his defense, flooding the court with letters begging for leniency.
It's like they've created this whole alternate reality where he's some kind of like anti-hero.
And this is where it gets really interesting psychologically speaking.
Okay.
You have to wonder, what is it about Wade Wilson that inspires this kind of devotion.
Right.
Some of it, no doubt, is that human trafficking angle.
Sure.
People want to believe they're fighting against a larger injustice.
Right. It taps into that whole question everything, believe no one mindset that's so prevalent online these days.
Exactly. But then there's this other element, the Wade Wilson fandom.
Yeah.
He's young, he's got that whole bad boy image going for him.
Right.
It's almost like people are confusing him with a fictional character.
Oh, totally. Like they're casting him as the misunderstood hero in their own true crime drama.
And that's where things get really unsettling.
Right.
Because it's one thing to believe in someone's innocence.
Right.
But it's another to almost fetishize them,
yeah.
especially when there's such strong evidence to the contrary.
Right.
And you see this in the rewards some supporters are offering for donations.
What?
Phone calls with Wade, pieces of clothing he's worn.
Wait, seriously. Phone calls close.
Yeah.
It's like they're bidding on a date with him or something. That's messed up.
It blurs the lines, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You have to wonder, are these people genuinely invested in his innocence?
Yeah.
Or are they just caught up in the drama, the intrigue, the perceived closeness to someone who committed such notorious crimes?
It's almost like they're fans of the crime itself more than anything else.
And that's a disturbing thought, isn't it?
It really is.
That the darker aspects of human nature can be not just compelling, but almost celebrated.
Yeah.
But even with this whole online frenzy, the legal process continued.
So what happened at the trial? Did his lawyers try to use his claims of being framed to get him off the hook? They went all in on the human trafficking angle. Yeah, they argued that Wade was a victim coerced into confessing to protect his family after that fire.
Right.
They even brought in experts to testify about the psychological effects of trauma
Okay.
and the tactics used by these kinds of organizations.
So they were really playing the sympathy card,
Right,
painting him as someone who was, manipulated into a corner.
exactly. And remember, they also highlighted his past struggles, the
Mhm.
drugs, the head injuries,
Yeah.
trying to paint a picture of a vulnerable young man who was taken advantage of.
Right.
But the prosecution wasn't buying it. They kept coming back to those early detailed confessions,
Right.
the physical evidence and the inconsistencies in his story.
What about Wade? Did he testify?
He did. And this is where it gets really fascinating from a psychological perspective.
Okay.
You have all this evidence stacked against him, right?
Right.
But on the stand, Wade was calm, collected, even charming at times.
Hold on, charming. Are we talking about the same guy
I know.
who described running over a woman until she looked like spaghetti?
It's jarring, isn't it? But he managed to maintain eye contact with the jury,
Wow.
spoke eloquently about his remorse, even shed a few tears when talking about his adoptive parents.
Okay, now that's just masterful manipulation, if you ask me.
It's certainly a possibility, and it's a question that has lingered over this entire case.
Yeah.
Is Wade Wilson a sociopath who can turn on the charm like a light switch?
Right.
Or a genuinely troubled individual who just got in over his head?
So what did the jury make of it all? Were they swayed by his performance, so to speak?
Ultimately, no. They deliberated for days, which tells you how complex and contradictory the evidence was.
Wow.
But in the end, they found Wade Wilson guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder.
Wow. Guilty even with that whole human trafficking defense.
Right.
And his, attempts to charm the jury.
It seems the evidence, those early confessions in particular, were just too damning to ignore.
Right.
And this verdict brings us to another layer of this story, the sentencing.
Okay.
Because remember that online support we talked about? Well, it exploded after the guilty verdict.
Let me guess. More petitions, more fundraising, more rewards for supporters.
You got it. It was like they doubled down on their belief in his innocence.
Wow.
They flooded the judge with letters, held rallies outside the courthouse, even started a whole campaign centered around the idea that he was a political prisoner.
A political prisoner. How do they spin that one?
They argued that Roe v. Wade was being made an example of,
Okay.
that he was being silenced because he knew too much about this powerful human trafficking ring.
Oh, my God.
It was a whole conspiracy theory layered on top of an already unbelievable story.
So you have the actual legal case playing out in court
Right.
and this, parallel narrative being constructed online.
Right.
It's almost like watching 2 different realities unfold at the same time.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, in the age of information overload and social media echo chambers, how do we even begin to discern truth from fiction?
Right.
How much of what we believe is shaped by these carefully curated narratives?
It's a question that goes way beyond the Wade Wilson case.
Yeah.
It's something we all have to grapple with.
Yeah.
Speaking of grappling, where does the case stand now?
Wade Wilson is currently on death row awaiting execution. He maintains his innocence, claiming he was framed by the trafficking ring.
What are the chances of his sentence being overturned?
Slim, but not impossible. His lawyers are appealing the verdict,
Yeah.
focusing on what they claim are inconsistencies in the evidence and potential juror misconduct.
So even though the trial is over, the story isn't finished yet.
Right.
And, it makes you think it's easy to get caught up in the sensationalism of true crime.
Yeah.
But we can't forget the human cost of these crimes.
Right.
2 women are dead, their families forever changed.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, you have Wade Wilson. Whether he's a cold-blooded killer or a victim of circumstance,
Right.
sitting in prison, his life effectively over, it's a tragedy on multiple levels.
Yeah.
And one that continues to raise more questions than answers.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. This deep dive has been a wild ride, twists, turns, and more than a few wait what moments.
You said it. This case is a stark reminder that truth can be subjective, justice can be elusive, and sometimes the most disturbing monsters are the ones we create in our own minds.